The storm outside howled like a living thing as Eric stumbled through the jagged rocks of the alien wasteland. His breath came in short bursts, each one scraping his throat like sandpaper. He had been running for hours, chased by things he didn't want to see again. The sky burned with streaks of red lightning that flashed against the broken metal skeletons of long-dead ships. Somewhere ahead, a massive shadow loomed, the derelict ship. It was bigger than any structure he had ever seen. Its hull torn in places like a beast's carcass left for scavengers. The blackened surface reflected the lightning in quick bursts, almost as if the ship were watching him. He felt the pull of it, not just for shelter, but for something deeper, something he couldn't name. His boots crunched on twisted steel as he approached, the sound swallowed by the ship's empty silence. Eric stepped through the broken airlock, and the world outside vanished behind him. The air was still heavy, carrying the scent of rust and dust. Lights flickered faintly in the distance, glowing like dying stars. The corridors stretched out in all directions, each one lined with strange markings that shimmered faintly when his flashlight passed over them. His instincts told him to turn back, but the memory of the hunters outside pushed him forward. Every step echoed, each one sounding louder than it should. The walls were curved, the floors smooth under his worn boots, and the occasional hiss of air escaping through some unseen crack made him tense. He passed what looked like doorways, but they were sealed tight, their surfaces covered in a layer of frost. Something about the ship felt alive, as though it were breathing in slow, measured intervals. Halfway down a long corridor, the temperature dropped sharply. His breath came out in visible clouds, and frost began to creep along the edges of the floor. He stopped, listening. That was when he heard it, a voice soft and close, like a whisper spoken directly into his ear. It was a woman's voice, rich and cold, with words that made his stomach knot. "I ate the last one like you 500 years ago," she said. The flashlight shook slightly in his hand. He turned in a slow circle, trying to find the source of the voice, but there was nothing. The shadows seemed thicker now, as if they had weight. The voice had sounded so real, so near, that he half expected to feel warm breath against his neck. But the corridor remained empty. He told himself it was just his mind playing tricks after days of running without sleep. The lights above him flickered again, this time longer, and when they came back, he saw movement at the far end of the corridor. A shape tall, slender, and glowing faintly in the dim light. It didn't walk so much as glide, and with each step, the metal beneath its feet seemed to hum. Eric's pulse quickened, his hand tightening on the grip of his knife. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was coming for him. The figure stepped into clearer view, and his breath caught. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin was deep blue, smooth and flawless, shimmering like polished stone under the flickering lights. Her eyes glowed gold, sharp and unblinking. Silver white hair spilled over her shoulders, framing a face that was both beautiful and dangerous. Armor clung to her form like it had been grown, black and gold with jagged edges that seemed part of her body. A long, sinuous tail swayed slowly behind her as she moved closer. She stopped only a few steps away, her eyes locked on his. There was no sound except the faint hum of the ship around them. Eric's grip on his knife loosened slightly, not from trust, but because he knew it wouldn't make a difference. The air between them felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. Then, without moving her lips, he heard the same voice again inside his head, cold, certain, and promising something terrible. Eric's heart pounded so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. The alien woman did not move, but there was a presence about her that filled the corridor like a storm cloud. Her golden eyes studied him in silence, as though she were deciding whether he was worth the trouble. He wanted to speak, to ask what she was, but something in his mind warned him to stay quiet. It was the same instinct that had kept him alive this long. The faint hum of the ship deepened, resonating through the walls and floor. Eric's flashlight flickered again, and for a moment, he thought he saw shapes moving just beyond the edge of the light. They were small, quick, and skittering along the walls like insects. The alien woman's gaze shifted slightly, following the movement, but she made no effort to stop them. Her attention returned to him with unsettling focus. "You came here to survive," her voice echoed in his mind. This time, it was clearer, like a cold wind sweeping through his skull. But survival has a price. Eric tightened his jaw, not wanting to answer, but he could feel her pulling at his thoughts. It was as though his mind was a locked room, and she was already inside, opening doors he had kept closed for years. He took a slow step backward, never taking his eyes off her. The movement seemed to amuse her. The corner of her mouth curled in what could have been a smile, though it held no warmth. "You smell like fear," she said, her words wrapping around him like a tightening rope. "The last one smelled the same before I broke him." Her voice did not rise or fall. It remained steady, unshakable, and that made it more dangerous than any scream. Eric's breathing grew faster, and he hated that she could hear it. Behind her, the corridor seemed to stretch into darkness, the faint red glow of distant lights casting long shadows. Shapes shifted there, larger now, but staying just out of sight. Eric realized they were not hiding from him. They were waiting. The alien woman took one slow step toward him, and the air felt heavier, as though gravity itself had thickened. He fought the urge to retreat further, knowing it would only feed her power. He thought of the hunters outside, the ones who had driven him to this place. Compared to them, she was something entirely different. They had been predators of the body. She was a predator of the soul. He could see it in the way she watched him, not with hunger for flesh, but with curiosity for the will that kept him standing. He gripped the knife tighter, but it felt like a toy in his hand compared to her presence. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. His voice sounded smaller than he intended, swallowed by the vastness of the ship's silence. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she tilted her head as if considering the question. "I want to know if you are worth keeping," she replied. The last one was not. The words carried weight, and in them, he felt the truth of her earlier claim. She had ended someone before him, and she had done it without hesitation. Eric's mind raced. If she wanted to kill him, she could have done it already. That meant there was a game here, one with rules he did not yet understand. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to think. "And if I'm not worth keeping?" he asked. This time her smile widened, showing a hint of teeth sharper than any human's. "Then you will join the others in the dark," she said. The way she spoke the word dark made it sound like a place rather than an absence of light. The humming of the ship grew louder, as if responding to her words. The walls seemed to ripple faintly, and the distant skittering of unseen creatures moved closer. Eric felt the air shift, carrying with it a scent that was neither pleasant nor foul, but alien in a way that unsettled his senses. The woman's tail moved slowly from side to side, the motion deliberate, like a predator pacing before a strike. Then, without warning, the lights overhead flared bright, revealing more of the corridor. Eric caught a glimpse of what lay beyond. Her rows of strange, upright pods lining the walls, each one covered in frost. Inside some of them, shapes could be seen, their features obscured by ice. The woman glanced over her shoulder at them, then back at him. "These are the ones who failed," she said, her voice low but sharp. "Do not think you will find mercy here." Eric's eyes stayed fixed on the frozen shapes inside the pods. The frost blurred their faces, but the outlines were unmistakable. Human bodies were locked within the ice, their limbs bent in unnatural positions, as if they had been placed there. While still resisting, the sight sent a chill deeper than the cold air could reach. His mind flashed with the image of himself inside one of those pods, waiting for centuries in silent darkness. The alien woman watched his reaction with an expression that was hard to read. Her golden eyes flickered like embers, and for a moment, it seemed as though she was measuring his fear. Eric forced himself to stand straighter, refusing to let her see how much the sight had shaken him. He knew predators could smell fear, and she was far more than a simple predator. She was something old and dangerous, something that had learned patience. She stepped closer, her bare feet making no sound against the metal floor. The armor she wore shifted with her movements, the gold edges catching the dim light and scattering it across the corridor. "They came here thinking they could win," she said in that steady, echoing voice. "But the ship does not belong to them. It never did." Eric glanced at the pods again, wondering if any of those frozen shapes had ever been alive when placed there. The hum of the ship pulsed through the air, steady and deep, like a slow heartbeat. Eric could feel it in his bones, a rhythm that did not match his own. He thought of the world outside, the storm and the hunters, and realized there was no safety to return to. This ship was his only shelter now, but it was also a cage. And the woman in front of him held the key to whether he would walk free or join the frozen dead. "What do you want me to do?" he asked finally, his voice low but firm. She tilted her head, her silver hair sliding over her shoulder in a fluid motion. "I want to see if you can survive this place," she replied. "If you can, you may earn the right to leave." The way she spoke made it clear that leaving was not something often granted. Eric's gut told him she was offering a test, but one that could kill him long before it ended. She turned without another word and began to walk down the corridor, her tail swaying in slow arcs behind her. Eric hesitated for only a moment before following. He knew better than to stay alone in a place like this. The shadows seemed to lean in as they moved, the distant skittering of unseen creatures tracking their steps. Once or twice, he caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of his eye, but every time he turned, the space was empty. They passed through a wide chamber where the floor was cracked and uneven, revealing glimpses of something far below. Cold air rose from the gaps, carrying with it faint metallic scents. Strange growths clung to the walls, pulsing faintly like they were alive. Eric avoided touching them, but the alien woman moved through the room without hesitation. "The ship changes," she said without looking back. "It grows and adapts to those who enter it." Her words unsettled him more than the sight of the frozen bodies had. A ship that could change itself meant that nothing he saw was permanent, and every corner might hide something new. He kept his eyes on her, noting how easily she moved, as if she knew every shift in the metal beneath her feet. For a brief moment, he wondered if she had been here for the entire 500 years she had claimed. The thought made her seem less like a person and more like part of the ship itself. They reached another corridor, narrower and darker than the last. The light from above was almost gone, replaced by a faint blue glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air here was warmer, and Eric could hear a low, distant sound like water moving through pipes. The alien woman stopped suddenly, her eyes narrowing as she looked ahead. "It is awake," she said softly, and the words carried a weight that made the air feel heavier. Eric strained his ears, but all he could hear was the slow, pulsing hum that filled the ship. Then, from the darkness ahead, something began to move. He could see its shape forming, large and shifting, as if the shadows themselves had decided to take form. The woman stepped aside and gestured toward it. "Your test begins now," she sighed, her golden eyes gleaming in the dim blue light. The shape ahead moved with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each step echoing faintly along the narrow corridor. Eric could not make out its full form yet, but the glow of the walls reflected off a surface that was slick and dark, almost liquid in appearance. It filled the passage from floor to ceiling, forcing him to realize there would be no easy way past it. His hand instinctively went to his knife, though he doubted the weapon would do much against something like this. the alien woman did not move to help him. She simply stood to the side, watching with the same calm expression she had worn since he met her. Her eyes glowed brighter in the dim light, and he could sense her measuring him, as if this was a performance and she was the judge. "It knows you are here," she said softly, "and it is deciding what you are." The words felt less like a warning and more like a challenge. Eric steadied his breathing and took a step forward. The thing shifted, and now he could see part of its face, or what passed for one. A cluster of deep-set eyes blinked in sequence, each one reflecting the faint blue glow. Its body was covered in plates of flexible armor that pulsed slightly, as if alive. The scent of damp metal filled the air, and a low, vibrating growl began to build from deep within its chest. He forced himself not to retreat. The hunters outside had been relentless, but this was something entirely different. This was the ship's creature, a part of its strange living ecosystem. If he backed away now, he knew the alien woman would see him as unworthy. He adjusted his grip on the knife, stepping into a stance that would let him react quickly. The creature lowered itself, muscles tensing, preparing to strike. The attack came fast. Faster than he expected. It surged forward in a blur of motion, and Eric barely managed to roll to the side. The impact of its charge cracked the wall where he had been standing, sending shards of metal clattering to the floor. He came up in a crouch, heart pounding, and saw the creature's tail lashing behind it like a whip. Its eyes locked on him again, and there was no hesitation in its next move. Eric darted to the left, keeping low. The creature swung its tail, and the tip smashed into the wall, leaving a dent as deep as his hand. He knew a direct hit would break bones. He ducked under its next strike and drove his knife toward a gap in its armor. The blade sank in only a little before stopping, the surface resisting like stone. The creature roared, the sound shaking dust from the ceiling above. From the corner of his eye, he saw the alien woman watching without expression. She made no move to intervene, though he could feel her attention on every motion he made. The knowledge that she was studying him drove him harder. He sidestepped another lunge, waiting for the right moment. The creature's movements were powerful, but not without pattern. He began to read its timing, predicting where it would strike. Next, when the opening came, he moved without hesitation. As the creature reared back, he darted forward, slipping under its raised limb and stabbing upward into a softer joint beneath its armor. The blade sank deeper this time, and the creature bellowed, twisting violently to throw him off. Eric hit the floor hard, the air leaving his lungs, but he rolled quickly to avoid another crushing blow from its tail. The creature staggered, its movements less precise now. A dark, thick fluid leaked from the wound, steaming in the cool air. Eric pushed himself to his feet, gripping the knife tightly. He could end this if he struck again in the same place. The alien woman took one slow step forward, her eyes narrowing. As she watched, "Do not hesitate," her voice rang in his mind, "or you will join the frozen ones." Summoning the last of his strength, Eric lunged forward. The creature swung at him, but he ducked low and drove the blade into the same joint with all his weight behind it. The armor cracked, and the blade sank deep. The creature gave one final shudder before collapsing to the floor, its body twitching once before going still. Eric stood over it, chest heaving, the metallic scent thick in his nose as the alien woman stepped closer to inspect his kill. Eric stood over the fallen creature and felt the tremor in his legs. The fight had taken more from him than he wanted to admit. Steam rose from the dark fluid spread across the floor, and the air carried a sharp metallic taste. He wiped his knife on a strip of cloth and straightened his back as the alien woman approached without haste. Her golden eyes calm and unreadable, she circled the carcass once, then looked up at him with the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. "You learn fast when death is close," she said. Her voice did not echo now. It sat inside his mind like a stone. The ship accepts your effort, but effort is not survival. Eric met her gaze and forced his breathing to slow, knowing she weighed every small weakness she saw. What comes next, he said, and what do I gain if I win? He needed a rule, even a thin one, to hold in his hands. The woman's silver hair shifted as she turned down the corridor. If you pass the next threshold, the ship will let you live, she replied. If you pass them all, it may let you leave. The word may landed heavier than the cold air pressing against his skin. They moved through a narrow passage that opened into a vast chamber shaped like a bowl. The walls were veined with faint blue light that pulsed in slow rhythm, and the floor was covered in shallow water that rippled with each step. From every direction came soft whispers, like breath, sliding over glass. Eric felt the words brush his ears, but could not catch them until they grew bold enough to carry names. The names were his. His father's voice called him a coward for leaving the farm. His commander barked orders he had failed to obey. A friend spoke from a memory he tried to bury, asking why he had run. Eric felt heat rise to his face even in the cold. He clenched. His jaw focused on the weight of his boots in the water, counted each step, and refused to give the voices shape. The alien woman walked a half circle around him, never touching the water. This is the atrium of echoes, she said. The ship listens. It repeats what breaks a mind. The whispers swelled, then faltered as Eric kept his pace and his breath steady. He could not stop the voices, but he would not speak back to them. After a slow minute, the chamber grew quiet, leaving only the pulse of the walls. You did not answer, she noted. Eric nodded. Answering makes them real, he said. She watched him with interest new in her gaze. The last one argued until his throat bled, she said. He wanted to win the memory. Her tail moved in a patient arc behind her. He lost to himself. Eric looked at the blue veins in the wall and felt a truth there he did not want, but could carry. A heavy door waited at the far side of the bowl, shaped like 4 ribs closing over a heart. The woman lifted her hand and the veins brightened, but the door did not open. It takes a mark, she said, and pointed to a small panel grown from the metal. Place your palm here. The ship will taste you. Eric set his jaw, pressed his hand flat, and felt a line of needles slide into his skin like cold fire. Pain shot up his arm and across his chest, bright and clean. He did not pull away. He counted 3 breaths and let the pain pass through him like the storm wind outside. The needles withdrew. The ribs parted with a low groan, and warm air spilled through the gap. Beyond the door, a long spine of a corridor led downward, and faint lights winked like distant beacons under deep water. They stepped through, and small machines drifted from the ceiling like pale moths. Each one hummed, turned, and fixed a lens. On Eric's face, surveyors, she said. They measure will and motion. One darted close. Eric moved faster, slashing with his knife, and its shell split with a clean ring. The edge came away, slick with the creature's steaming blood from before, and where the fluid touched a second machine, its wing curled and failed as if the metal had burned. Eric used that small luck with care. He flicked the fluid from the blade toward the nearest cluster and stepped into their stagger, striking each lens and wing in turn. Pieces clattered to the floor and skidded in bright arcs across the smooth metal. The woman watched, and for the first time he saw her eyes. Narrow not in threat, but in approval. You adapt, she said. That is rarer than strength here. The corridor widened into a chamber shaped like a throat, and at its center stood a column of glass filled with slow-turning light. Symbols moved across its surface like frost growing in patterns. The ship's memory, she said. It holds many worlds and many dead. Eric stepped closer and felt the pull of it in his bones, the same rhythm he had felt since entering the hall. He could sense questions inside it like knives wrapped in cloth. Tell me your name, Eric said without looking away from the column. The woman stood beside him with her hands at her sides, fingers relaxed. For a long breath she said nothing. Then she turned her head, and the light caught the smooth line of her jaw. "Cerise," she said. The name fit the air here, sharp and clear. The ship gave it to me when it chose to keep me. The word keep did not feel like comfort. He looked at her then, really looked. The hunger in her was not simple. It was the way a storm wants the ridge to break. "You were like me once," he said. "You came here to survive." Cerise did not deny it. "I came here to end dying," she said. "The ship taught me a different shape of hunger." Her voice cooled again, but did not harden. "If you want to leave, you will need a different hunger than fear." The glass column turned faster, and the chamber lights rose as if the ship had drawn one long breath. Cerise lifted her hand, and symbols unlocked around the base, revealing a narrow slot the size of a palm. "Place your mark again," she said. "Claim a path, or the ship will choose one for you." Eric stood with his hand open, fingers steady, and felt the weight of the choice press on his skin like a brand. Eric pressed his palm to the slot, feeling the cold metal pulse beneath his skin. A faint sting ran along his hand as the ship marked him again. This time the sensation traveled deeper, threading into his arm and settling near his heart. The glass column flared with light, symbols racing faster, and the floor beneath his boots shifted as if something massive had awakened below. He kept his hand steady until the glow receded and the slot released him. The air felt heavier, warmer, almost like the ship was breathing against his skin. Cerise stepped closer, her golden eyes locked on him. "It has chosen a path," she said. "You will walk where even I have not gone." Her tone was calm, but Eric thought he caught a note of curiosity beneath it. He had learned enough to know that her interest could mean danger or respect, and sometimes both at once. A section of the wall slid open without sound, revealing a narrow bridge suspended over a vast hollow. The space below was filled with shifting shapes that glowed faintly, moving in slow liquid arcs. The bridge was barely wider than his shoulders, with no rails to keep him from falling. Warm air rose from the depths, carrying the smell of salt and metal mixed with something sharp, almost like burnt stone. Cerise gestured toward the bridge. "Cross it without falling, and the ship will accept you further." Eric narrowed his eyes at the glowing shapes below. They did not move like harmless currents. Each movement was deliberate, as if the creatures were watching for the first misstep. He took a slow breath and stepped forward, his boots making a soft thud against the smooth metal. The bridge trembled faintly under his weight. Halfway across, the shapes below stirred faster. A sleek form rose toward him, breaking the surface of the glowing mass. It was long and serpentine, with a head shaped like a blade and rows of small, glimmering eyes. The creature matched his pace beneath the bridge, keeping level with him. Eric kept his focus ahead, knowing any distraction could cost him his balance. The hum of the ship seemed louder here, vibrating through his legs. The serpent struck without warning, its head darting upward. Eric dropped to a knee, and the blade-shaped head sliced the air where his chest had been. The force of the strike rocked the bridge, sending a shudder through his arms. He gripped the surface with one hand and forced himself back to his feet. The creature circled below, its tail cutting bright trails in the glowing depths. He could feel the heat of its presence even from above. A second serpent joined the first, and now both moved in a slow spiral beneath him. The bridge swayed in a pattern that matched their motion, making each step a test of timing. Eric adjusted his pace, stepping only when the bridge shifted toward the direction he needed to go. He remembered Cerise's words about the ship changing. For those inside, it was not just watching him, it was shaping the trial to break him. One serpent lunged again, and this time Eric sidestepped rather than dropping low. The creature's head clipped the edge of the bridge, sending a sharp vibration through his feet. He used the moment to run 2 quick steps forward, gaining distance before they could attack again. The far end of the bridge seemed closer now, but the glow from below brightened, and the air grew hotter against his skin. A third shape rose from the depths, larger than the others. Its body was thicker, its movements slower but far more deliberate. The smaller serpents moved aside for it, circling at a distance. Eric recognized the patterned predators giving space to something greater. The massive serpent's head broke the surface, and he saw that its eyes were not many small points of light, but 2 great orbs that glowed with the same gold as Cerese's eyes. The bridge shuddered again as the giant serpent's gaze fixed on him. For a moment, he could hear nothing but the slow beat of his own heart. Then the creature lowered itself slightly, and the surface of the glowing mass rippled outward. A wave of heat struck him full in the face, and he understood this was no simple guardian. This was part of the ship itself, a living extension of its will. If he failed here, the ship would decide his place among the frozen. He took one final steadying breath, then sprinted the last stretch of the bridge. The giant serpent rose higher, mouth opening to reveal rows of teeth like polished glass. Eric threw himself forward, just as the head struck upward, the force of its movement shaking the bridge from end to end. His boots hit the far platform hard, knees bending to absorb the impact. Behind him, the serpent's head stopped inches from the edge, its eyes still locked on him as it sank back into the glowing depths. Cerese stood waiting, her expression unreadable. "The ship lets you pass," she said. "But it does not forget." Eric straightened, his chest still heaving, and met her gaze. He wondered if she had once crossed the same bridge, or if this was truly a path the ship had kept from her. Either way, he had moved one step closer to whatever truth waited at the heart of this place. Beyond the bridge, the air was cooler, carrying a faint scent like rain on metal. The corridor ahead was narrow, lit only by a faint silver glow from veins in the walls. Eric's footsteps echoed softly, and each sound seemed to travel far, as though the ship wanted him to hear his own presence. Cerese walked beside him in silence, her tail moving with a steady rhythm that matched the slow pulse of light around them. The corridor opened into a chamber shaped like an oval, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center stood a raised platform, with a single object resting on it. The object was a sphere, smooth and black, yet faintly reflecting the light from the walls. Around the platform, the floor was etched with symbols that looked like a mixture of writing and circuitry. Eric stepped forward, but Cerese placed a hand lightly on his chest. "This is the core's threshold," she said. "Only one chosen may touch what rests there. The last who tried without being chosen never walked again." Her voice was low, and Eric could feel the seriousness in it. He nodded once, stepping toward the platform only when she lowered her hand. The air grew thicker as he crossed the etched floor, as if the ship itself was pressing against him to measure his steps. The sphere seemed to draw in light as he approached, its surface shifting like liquid shadow. When he was only an arm's length away, a faint hum rose in the chamber, vibrating through his bones. Eric reached out slowly, his fingers brushing the surface. The instant he made contact, the black sphere brightened with a deep crimson glow, and the floor symbols lit up in a rapid sequence that circled around him. A surge of heat ran from the sphere into his arm, racing through his chest and down into his legs. The sensation was not pain, but it was far from comfort. Images flashed. In his mind cities under alien skies, oceans of glass, forests of bone. Voices whispered in languages he did not know, yet somehow understood. Each image carried the weight of centuries, and he realized the sphere was showing him the ship's memory. The images shifted to faces, some human, some alien, all staring at him with eyes that spoke of endings. Among them, he saw Cerese, younger, without the gold in her eyes, standing in a place that looked like the chamber they were in now. She reached toward the sphere, but the vision ended before he could see what happened. The crimson glow dimmed slightly, and the hum lowered to a slow, steady beat. "You have been marked again," Ceres said, her tone unreadable. "The ship knows you now as part of itself." Eric stepped back from the platform, his breathing steady, but his heart racing. He felt changed in a way he could not name, as though part of the ship's endless memory now lived inside him. He wondered how much of it was real, and how much was meant to shape him for whatever came next. Without warning, the ground beneath them shifted. The etched floor panels slid apart, revealing a wide spiral staircase that descended into a dim glow far below. The air from below was warmer, carrying the sound of moving water mixed with something that might have been distant machinery. Ceres started down the steps without looking back, and after a moment's pause, Eric followed. The descent felt longer than it should have been. The glow below grew brighter, shifting from silver to a pale gold that matched Ceres's eyes. The stairs ended in a vast underground hall, its walls lined with tall glass columns filled with swirling light. Between the columns, faint shapes moved, some humanoid, others far stranger. Eric slowed his steps, taking in the sight of so many. "Silent watchers. This is the archive of the kept," Ceres said, her voice carrying easily in the stillness. "Those who passed the trials but never left the ship remain here. They guard its memory, and in return, the ship gives them existence without decay." Eric felt a chill crawl across his back at the thought of standing among them for eternity. The shapes in the glass did not move toward him, but he could feel their eyes, ancient and heavy, fixed on him. At the far end of the hall, a set of massive doors waited. They were not made of metal or glass, but something like polished stone that shimmered faintly as though it held starlight inside. The doors had no handles or seams, yet Eric felt certain they could open if the ship willed it. Ceres stopped before them, placing her palm flat against the surface. "Only those the ship accepts may step through," she said. The stone shimmered brighter, then darkened again. Ceres looked at him, her gaze steady. "It will open for you if you are ready," she said. Eric stepped forward, feeling the weight of the hall behind him and the silent attention of every figure in the glass. He placed his hand on the door, and the surface was cool, smooth, and unyielding. A low vibration traveled through his arm, as though the ship was deciding his fate. The door beneath Eric's hand began to warm, the vibration deepening until it resonated in his chest. Light bled from the stone in slow ripples, running outward in perfect circles that spread across the surface. The gold veins inside the door flared brighter, and then, with a sound like air releasing from a sealed chamber, the stone split apart. The halves slid away to reveal a space filled with shifting light, and a vast sense of open air beyond the threshold. He stepped forward cautiously, his boots meeting a floor that looked like glass but felt solid underfoot. The space stretched outward farther than he could see, yet the ceiling glimmered faintly as though lit by a hidden sky. Streams of light rose from the floor and curled upward like smoke, forming shapes that almost looked like faces before dissolving again. Ceres followed, her presence at his side steady, her golden eyes scanning the endless expanse. At the center of the space stood a structure that resembled both a throne and a control seat. It was made from the same polished stone as the door, with veins of light running along its surface. Eric felt a pull toward it, a deep instinct telling him that whatever ruled the ship sat there once, and perhaps still did in another form. Ceres stopped a few paces short, her tail curling around her ankle as she watched him approach. "The core has brought you here to choose," she said. "Sit, and the ship will bind itself to you. Refuse, and it will cast you out." Her voice was calm, but her gaze carried something more, an intensity that felt like expectation and warning in equal measure. Eric looked from the throne to her, wondering what it had meant for her to be kept by the ship instead of bound to it. He stepped forward again, the light at his feet shifting with each step. When he reached the base of the throne, the streams of light thickened, wrapping loosely around his arms and legs like warm water. He rested his hands on the smooth surface, and the warmth deepened until it became a steady, thrumming heartbeat against his skin. Images poured into his mind again, this time not just memories of the ship, but glimpses of where it could go, what it could become, and the countless worlds that might be reached. He saw himself at the helm, guiding the ship through seas of stars, choosing its path with a thought. He saw dangers beyond the reach of any map, forces that would test every strength he had. Yet he also saw the frozen ones in their pods, their eyes closed forever, and he understood that to sit here was to carry the weight of every choice the ship demanded. The decision was not one of survival alone, it was one of ownership and consequence. Eric turned his head slightly toward Cerise. "If I take this, what happens to you?" he asked. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she tilted her head. "I will remain," she said. "The ship keeps what it wants. But if you sit, it may want you more than me." Her tone held no bitterness, only fact, but the words carried a shadow of something deeper. He looked back at the throne, the hum beneath his hands now pulsing with quiet insistence. He thought of the hunters outside, the storm, and the endless corridors of this living vessel. He thought of the trials, the creatures, and the voices that tried to break him. Every step had led him here, and every choice had been shaped by the ship's unseen will. Slowly, he lowered himself into the seat, the light coiling tighter around him until it met in a single point at the center of his chest. The chamber shifted instantly. The floor beneath them rippled outward like liquid glass, the streams of light rising higher until they formed a dome around the throne. The hum became a steady roar inside his mind, and a voice not Cerise's spoke directly to him. "You are bound," it said. "Your path is the ship's path. Your life is the ship's life." The words were not a request or a bargain. They were a law written into his very being. Cerise stepped closer, her expression as unreadable as when they first met. "Then you are no longer just a survivor," she said. "You are the ship's will." Eric rose from the throne, feeling the weight of his new bond in every movement. The light faded slowly, but the hum remained inside him, constant and unshakable. He looked toward the open expanse beyond the chamber, the endless possibilities waiting in the dark between the stars.